We welcome the opportunity today to make a statement on the issue of service provision for international protection applicants and recipients, and indeed on the topic of immigration and more broadly our international protection system. There are certain deputies who have recently given the impression that they believe this topic is off limits, that having debate is somehow being stifled by some grand conspiracy, that we must simply accept government policy and move along. Of course, that's not the case. Deputies are free to raise issues as they see fit in their own time, leaders' questions, private members' time, whatever the case may be, and so they have. But some have done so at times in the most despicable terms. In the past number of weeks and months, we have heard deputies use their time to spread misinformation and disinformation about immigrants and international protection applicants, trying to link immigration with criminality, using just about every dog whistle imaginable, stopping just shy of outright racism. And this hasn't just happened from deputies in this House, it has happened on the ground in constituencies too, where leaflets have been dropped warning of conflict when modular homes were being built for Ukrainian refugees, or taking to the stage at various rallies. It can be difficult sometimes to state where the line of decency is in the abstract, but when you're presented with a situation, it's very clear, at least to those who I believe are on the right side of this debate, to know when they've overstepped and have fed the far right in their actions. This is not debate, it's fear-mongering. It's preying on whatever legitimate concerns or anxieties people have and pointing them towards vulnerable people, and it's straight out of the far-right playbook. We're now at a point where people are coming to Ireland seeking protection here, fleeing war, persecution. We've economic migrants who come here looking for a better life, just as millions of Irish people have gone and continue to go to other countries. These vulnerable people now feel unsafe in our country, and this is most shameful. I've always been proud that we in Ireland did not fall prey to these hateful and dangerous narratives as many of our neighbours across Europe have. I spoke recently to a man who lives in an area that has taken in a number of Ukrainian refugees over the past 2 years. He told me that these people had joined the local choir, integrating well into the community. Indeed, the local people had welcomed them with open arms, a story that is very familiar to many of us throughout the country. Regrettably, over time, less and less of the Ukrainian people have been going to these choir practices. When asked, they state they are afraid to put themselves out there in the communities where they are being housed. They no longer feel welcome. But they're clear to say that it's not the people within the community that are making them feel unwelcome. It is what they are seeing online, all the hate and all the falsehoods. They are seeing misinformation and disinformation that is then being amplified by many, including deputies in this House. I think it's important to note it's something that gets lost in all the hysteria whipped up by bad actors, that the overwhelming majority of communities have been like the one I just mentioned. They have welcomed these vulnerable people, embraced their new neighbours. The scenes that we saw recently in Rosscrea or seen previously in East Wall are very much in the minority. That is not to say these sort of scenes should not concern us. I don't think any of us will ever be able to forget some of those images, or indeed the images of the burned out refugee encampment just down the road from us here in central Dublin. Of all of the appalling hate we've seen directed towards refugees and international protection applicants recently, I think that is one that stands out in particular for the sheer absence of any compassion or sympathy for these vulnerable people and the actions that cause the most severe harm. But there have been other instances. An alarming number of arson attacks have been carried out on facilities earmarked not only for international protection accommodation, but indeed for homeless accommodation through the Dublin Regional Homeless Executive. These are real, tangible threats to people's safety, not some imaginary or hypothetical threat posed by migrants. This is a real threat that will end up causing death. It is vital that we halt the spread of misinformation and disinformation and combat those who seek to advance an agenda of hate, of fear, of xenophobia and of racism. But that, and none of what I said previously, absolves the government of its failure in how they've dealt with both the recent arrival of international protection applicants or how they've dealt with the rise of anti-immigrant sentiment. Broadly speaking, I think the government's failings are twofold: a failure in communication and a failure in service provision. I will deal with the latter first, as it's more straightforward. The Taoiseach's intervention recently to clarify our international protection system was welcome. It's important that people are informed of how it works, the application process, how people coming into the country are vetted because they are vetted, and that there is no such thing as an unvetted migrant, and also what successful applicants are entitled to do. But unfortunately, that intervention has come way too late. And why has it taken until recently for the whole of government to begin clarifying matters? This should have been done in a more proactive and communicative approach. An approach, I believe, is the instinctive approach of Minister O'Gorman and indeed Minister O'Brien. I don't think that has been followed up by all of government. The second failure is in relation to communication with communities hosting refugees and IP applicants. I want to be careful here because I don't want to give the wrong impression. It is not the position of the Labour parties that communities should be consulted, implying that they should have a veto on hosting refugees and asylum seekers. We do not believe that anyone should have a veto. None of us should get to decide who our neighbours are. But we do believe that communities should be informed on what's happening in advance. There are great models that have developed and emerged in the last 2 years since the invasion of Ukraine that shows just how well communities can work when resources are put in place to ensure that there is communication. This should be given the opportunity to welcome and embrace the new neighbours. And like I've said, the overwhelming majority of communities have done so, but they should know what resources they have at their disposal. I'm just running out a bit of time, so I'll just move beyond. We need to resource communities in the immediate term, and this needs to be a whole of government approach. We do sympathise with Minister O'Gorman and Minister O'Brien, again, who have dealt with both personally on issues in relation to my own constituency, and know that their instinctive and their actual approach in terms of not only communication but also trying to get resources is the right thing, and they're trying to do the right thing. But we do not believe in the Labour Party that they have been supported either through education, the health service, or indeed housing. And we believe that what Ireland is facing is not a challenge of immigration, but it is another aspect of the crisis of accommodation and the crisis of housing. I'm glad the Minister of Health has joined us here, because we do need to see a specific approach on health in relation to the provision of health services to migrant communities. We know that local GPs, primary care centres and acute hospital settings are under pressure, but we need resources where we are going to be accommodating numbers of people. We need locum GPs and community health teams to be put in place to ensure that the arrival of people is done appropriately and they're getting the help they need. This is the kind of whole of government response that we in the Labour Party want. The government must give serious consideration to Labour's proposal to appoint a dedicated Minister of State for Immigration to coordinate the response to refugees coming to Ireland across departments and to ensure communities are getting the information and resources they deserve. We have a Minister of State who has stepped up in terms of responsibility, but Minister O'Brien also has other responsibilities in his department which need and demand his attention. Here, look, the Labour Party, the Labour Party believes that any discussion on migration must be rooted in compassion. Compassion for those fleeing war, fleeing violence, fleeing poverty. Leaving your homeland is not a decision anyone would take lightly. It is also our position in the Labour Party that these conversations must be grounded in a sense and an acknowledgement of our own history as a people who, for generations, have sought work and shelter across the world. I increasingly hear the claim that when Irish people have emigrated, we don't receive any help from wherever it is we've gone. We've simply pulled up our bootstraps and worked hard. This is not an accurate assertion and is disinformation in plain view. Wherever we have gone, we have been among us who have received welfare and indeed relied on the help of charities. But for the most part, we've contributed massively to the societies that have and continue to play host to us, just as immigrants into Ireland contribute massively to our own society. We cannot forget that the Irish economy and critical public services would grind to a halt without the immense contribution made by many from a migrant background. Half of our nurses are from abroad. Much of our hospitality sector is made up of migrants. In so many ways, our migrant communities have greatly enriched our society. And I'll finish by saying this. The Labour Party is clear. Ireland does not have an immigration problem. The problems faced in all communities across Irish society have risen due to a chronic underinvestment in public service and a failing housing policy. Neither of those elements are the fault of those coming to Ireland for protection. Government must begin to take investment in public infrastructure seriously and take on a whole-of-government approach to ensure that communities are supporting and hosting, welcoming and supporting those seeking protection. Everyone in this House must be mindful of their own actions, be it in their contributions here or indeed their actions in their constituencies. Thank you.